Today's guest has sat on both sides of the closing table. First, as the attorney closing over $1 billion in commercial real estate, and now as the investor owning more than 120,000 square feet of industrial triple net properties across 15 acres of outdoor storage. A Cornell educated attorney licensed in Texas and Florida, Ron Rohde founded his own law firm in 2017 and has since completed over $20 million in personal acquisitions in just this year alone. He's built a reputation for simplifying complex deals, scaling efficiently, and teaching thousands through his YouTube channel. Today, we unpack how he went from papering deals to owning them, and why he believes industrial real estate is one of the most overlooked wealth building assets in America. Ron, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Leo. I appreciate the kind words. Yeah, it's good to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. We've been talking about this for some time. So, would you mind just filling the audience in, maybe like what are the highlights to your career, not from an accomplishment standpoint, but maybe the best decisions that you've made? Because we were talking right before we started airing too.
Yeah, I think I took maybe a traditional lawyer route. Is the Asian parents and cracking the whip, saying you can be a lawyer or a doctor. I don't do blood, like I pass out, so I was like, oh, I'll go be a lawyer. But I did that route. I worked the jobs. I worked in house. I think the biggest and for one of the big inflections was a mentor at this company that I worked for. And he's, like a 30-year plus veteran in real estate. And he was just a tough negotiator, but he treated everything like a battle. And he said, if you don't treat it like a battle, you're gonna get killed by the other guy who does. And it was really, I guess, simple for that type of explanation, but it really resonated with me that life is a battle, and you're not satisfied if you just stay in your own lane and don't try to, I don't say like knock some heads. There is a lot of tough negotiations as a landlord from the tenant. They want something from you, and the direct inverse is dollars, more money in your pocket versus money in their pocket. And there just has to be a confrontation. It doesn't have to be confrontational, but it is a direct opposite interest. And I think once I kind of understood that and acknowledged it and maybe even embraced it in terms of this is what you're doing. You are fighting, you are going to battle. It really gave me a new appreciation for what I wanted to do. And I think everybody sits in their world. I'm in an office, not a cubicle. I'm sitting in my office and I'm just like collecting a paycheck. And it's like, it's all well and good, but is this really what I meant to do? Is this the highest and best use of my time? And I really felt like that answer was no. I really wanted to make money. I wanted to raise money. I had been a lawyer going full cycle with some of my clients. So, I help them buy the deal. They don't really do a lot of improvements. Maybe they sign a couple leases, but I was their lawyer as they worked it. And then I was their lawyer when they sold it. And I got to see the settlement statements, right? And I got to see how much they put into it over their ownership. And I just saw how much money they made. And I was like, this is crazy. They're not that smart. I'm not that smart. I could do it too. I have the capital. Why not me? And, I think both of those moments when I realized, okay, I can't just work a job forever. The worst thing you can do is kind of go back to a job. And that's not the worst thing ever. But the decision to do bigger real estate was also a big inflection because I think residential real estate is very safe. It's just not much risk. And the reward, it really isn't there unless you scale. The days of buying a deal, I used to buy houses in DFW for like 100 grand and they were renting for 1,200 a month. I mean, that was normal and that was common. And then I sold those properties for like 200 grand plus all the cash flow along the way. So I thought I was so good, like I was making like 150 grand of profit or something. And I was like, oh man, I'm so smart. But um, it's still a lot of work on the ownership. So I would point to those two events, the mentor that I had, that again, it doesn't matter what company it is. It's that direct relationship to your boss. And he was my direct superior. That's all that matters. I could work at a big four accounting company and your direct boss matters. You can work at a big law firm. just the partner that you report to, that's the only one that matters. There could be two partners or there could be 200. Doesn't really matter. And then the decision to do something bigger. And I don't know if it's like EOS or some of these goal setting things where it's like you have to have, yeah, it's a big, hairy, audacious goal, right? Has to be something that's a little bit scary to you because if you tell me right now, Leo, like, hey, Ron, here's a contract for a $5 million industrial deal. It's in DFW, great metrics, good tenant, so whatever. You want to buy? I'd be like, yeah, sure. I wouldn't even tell my wife, like, I wouldn't be excited. It would just be acceptable. But on the flip side, if you said, Ron, here's a $12 million deal, it's got this huge tenant, it's got this issue to solve. You want to take this down together? We'll do it. I'd be like, I don't know, man. 12 million is it's a big lift. We're looking at very different financing. The legal on both sides is going to be really ticky tacky. I have not necessarily done due diligence for a $12 million deal for my own deal where I'm willing to waive, a little bit of an encroachment on the driveway. And I'm like, okay, on my small deals, maybe I'll just waive it because it's like a foot or two and not a big deal. But you have to understand on a bigger lease, if the site plan promises a certain curb cut width and then the city comes in and condemns that curb for not being in compliance, then you're in default on your lease to your tenant. And if they choose to enforce it, you are. And I do not want to be on that risk for let's say it's a $200,000 a month lease, or not even $100,000 a month lease. I don't want to be on the hook for that. That's an incredible risk. And so that's when every foot, every inch of encroachment represents risk. So anyway, that's a very long answer to, I think those are the two inflection points, and willing to take on some scary deals that have risk. And, I look back and yeah, there were definite deals that were a little scary.
Hmm. It's interesting because you're in a unique position where, I mean, the stereotype is like, oh, attorneys kill deals, right? But you are the buyer and the attorney. So for you to look at a property in a certain way, right? I mean, how does that occur? Like, what do you think through when you're looking at a deal to say, like, is this good? Is this not? Do you talk yourself out of a lot of deals, or what's that like?
Yeah. So we do hire outside counsel. I don't want to make it sound like it's always me. And we will have another attorney kind of being closer to the weeds. But yeah, I'll make the final decision. I think that I'm not too conservative when it comes to legal issues, as long as they don't directly lead to a path of litigation. So again, for like that lease covenant thing, I wouldn't necessarily take that type of risk because I think it triggers like an immediate black and white default. If the lease didn't have the site plan or the driveway as an explicit landlord obligation, I would be willing to take that risk. So to me, it's a little bit black and white on those things. It's the gray areas of, well, the city says something in writing, but the city hasn't really enforced it, and it's debatable. Those are the things where, well, man, if you mess with the city, they're not they're not fun to deal with. Those are deals that I kill, but I don't think being a lawyer has made me more conservative or killed more deals. If anything, I think it helps because I really get a lot of market deal flow. And I see a lot of industrial PSAs and leasing and issues, issues that come up and kill deals, and lender issues and closing issues. So I get to see a lot more deals than the actual volume that I'm doing. And I see it from a different perspective than a broker, right? The broker might have half a dozen or a dozen transactions in a month, but they're only seeing it from the brokerage lens. And then I'm seeing, again, call it a dozen deals every month from the legal side. So we get way more in the weeds on lease interpretation, title issues, deed restrictions, and that sort of thing. Survey.
Interesting. So I guess from an investor standpoint, would your view be more different in the sense that you pay more attention to the legal and, maybe there's like an ugly asset, but like really good on the legal side, you're like, yeah, that one looks good, as opposed to like, a pretty asset that's just got like bad legal or something like that.
I don't really I don't think there's enough volume to create buckets like that. Legal is really just check the box yes for most situations, and only if it's a no there's issues, but the metrics of the deal have to be really good economics to justify a deeper dive into legal. But yeah, I don't think clean legal makes anything more attractive. That's an expectation.
Hmm. Fair. So how did you end up in industrial real estate? I mean, you do a lot of it, right? And that's like mostly what you do.
Yeah, we really do a lot. It's a little bit of a attempt to, really specialize. And I think the days of lawyers and really any service professional being generalists, and I'm not trying to do wills and estates, and I'm not trying to do divorce law or anything like that. But even within real estate, what's going to distinguish you and make people pick up the phone to call you is, well, Ron's an industrial expert. I won't claim to, be a multifamily $100 million new construction expert, but we can do a variety of deals. But if you want those referrals, if you want to be known as the best, I think owning those assets is huge. And so that's what it stemmed out of, was a desire to specialize, to be the best, and to get those referrals and to actually know what I'm talking about. Prior to that, when I had the SFR portfolio, it was just getting too much to manage. I think we had 6 properties. Even with a property manager, we were constantly replacing roofs, and I felt like we had tenant renewals all the time. It was like every month there was a renewal conversation, and it ultimately was my decision. So I was doing an asset class survey. I wanted to get into bigger deals to deploy more capital. I did know that the bandwidth, the brain damage is about the same. Buying and looking for one deal 10 times the price, it's about the same. A little bit more, but the returns are way more. But finding a good deal is just as hard. So I wanted commercial. My parents had owned some of this stuff before, so I was kind of exposed to it. But they were mostly residential investors, and I was close between multifamily and industrial. I kind of eliminated office. Glad I did. Maybe retail, but I felt like the management was a little bit too high touch, and so I settled on industrial. I'm glad I did, but that's what I did. I took a very scientific approach to it. I knew I wanted to be in DFW. I thought Texas was a great market. I didn't suffer from some of the coastal problems, right? You got these engineers in Bay Area, and they're like, "Well, Ron, if I want to buy industrial, it's $8 million for my first deal, and it's like a small single tenant building, kind of a big lift." So I understand that. Yeah, so that's why I just did a survey. I looked at all the you know, pros cons list and availability in the market, and I wanted longer term leases. So that kind of tipped the needle over for industrial. I wanted longer term leases where I wouldn't have to negotiate. I like triple net, where month to month, the base rent is, I don't say guaranteed, but that's assured, and you're not subject to property taxes and that kind of variance. But your downside is capped, but your upside is also capped for the duration based on market rent. So that was fine with me. I was like, I got the law firm to work on. I'm making money here. I'm not so worried about locking in capital for the duration of the lease term. I'm okay with that. So
Hmm.
that's how I picked industrial. I mean,
Yeah.
I love the asset class. I think it makes a lot of sense.
Hmm. So do you think industrial is almost like the perfect asset class, or like the perfect property kind for a person who maybe doesn't have full time to commit to this? Maybe they have another business that they're running, or like a daytime job or something.
I do. I do. I think industrial, particularly, or let me back up. I think commercial single tenant net leased assets do lend themselves to the easiest management. And that's on a day to day basis, because I don't want to pretend like there's no work. The work is just front loaded. You've got to do a ton of due diligence. You've got to research the tenant, do your projections, understand the building, have your capex modeling. But once you do all that front loading, you close, then it should be almost coupon clipping, versus a multi-tenant building, or if you have vacancies, that's active work. So if you buy something that's multi-tenant, be prepared that the month to month work is going to be higher. And I kind of prefer binary outcomes. Let's say on the single tenant is either, hey, this tenant is going to perform, they're going to stay and pay, or they're gonna blow out. But if they blow out, I've got other issues. I don't want to necessarily have 10 tenants where I'm guaranteed that two of them are going to blow out this year. And when I say blow, I mean default or just midnight move out, otherwise breach their lease in the middle.
Hmm. Does it
So
happen a lot in this space?
I think flex industrial and the smaller tenant size you get, yes, you absolutely get a lot of defaults in every market, every cycle. And this is true in retail. If you've got like the nail salons, the donut shops, nail salons are interesting. They don't necessarily default, but they'll change hands every couple of years. They're selling the business so often. I mean, I do a lot for my landlord in terms of assignment reviews and transferring leases to new guarantors.
Interesting. So what do you think is like, the biggest points of potential error for like people when you're looking at industrial properties? Is it the credit worthiness of the tenant? Is it like the lease length? Is it the location? Something else?
That's a great question. I think the biggest issue that I've seen is people underestimating vacancy, like backfilling a space, or people bring me a lot of like vacant deals and say, "Hey, Ron, should I buy this? I can put a tenant in." I see that's the number one like misunderstanding or misidentifying the problem, because I don't know why, but people feel like, well, why wouldn't the seller get a tenant? And because I asked them, I'm like, okay, that seems like an okay building. Maybe that's a rent, that's market. Why hasn't the seller gotten a tenant? And they're just like, I don't know. I'm like, he's owned this building for a while. He has a relationship. It's listed with a broker. Like, don't you think that if he could have gotten a tenant, he would have? And they're like, "Oh, I didn't think about that." And I was like, "Oh, that's fine, but what's your plan to make the building different?" And if they say, "Ron, I'm going to cut out these doors and add 2 feet of clear. I'm going to freshen up the office. I'm going to add a dock well. I'm going to put a new roof on it. I'm going to pave or gravel the yard storage." Okay, that's fine. That's a whole different asset. You are substantially changing the the presentation to a potential tenant, and that's pretty significant. That I do think you can lease up vacant buildings that have sat otherwise for 12 months, and then you buy it, you do those improvements, and you can get a tenant at market rent. But a lot of people don't have that full dramatic capex in mind. They're just like, well, I could just list it in the exact same place that it's listed for lease, and I'm going to get a tenant. I'm like, I don't get that. It's not, it's not that hard, too much work
Mhm.
from a seller's perspective. So yeah, I would say vacancy and kind of underestimating those costs, because also too, even for multi-tenant, you have a lot of cost with turnover. Make ready costs, maybe minor repairs in the unit. And then let's say you even get a new tenant. Let's say it's flex, right? Somebody blows out, you clean out the unit, you freshen up the paint, you have it on the market, you have some tours, you have some LOIs, you sign a lease. You're not getting rent that next day. It takes some time for all these process to happen. And then you're out of pocket some TI, maybe a little bit of TI, not much, but it's something. Leasing commissions. Those are outrageously large all the time. And it's not a good look to go into a market and say, "Oh, I want to cut all my brokers' fees." Because then they'll blacklist your building, and you don't want that. And then you might only give like 1 or 2 months of free rent, right? So we don't see like hefty TI packages per se, but we still are seeing a little bit of free rent, especially if you want that market base rent. I mean, look, it's all fungible, but I think most investors are trying to time their exit to where on renewal, and if they sell, the face rent looks really good. So in exchange, we're often giving 1 or 2 months of free rent up front. But people underestimate that cost because it's a lot. What I just described, between the months of downtime, between the make ready, behind the physical costs, TI and leasing commissions, and legal fees, don't forget about us. It can be a lot that you're in the hole 50 grand on a 2,000 square foot space. And it's insane. You're like, bro, Ron, I only budgeted 10. I'm like, well, you got to figure something out, because maybe it's 40, maybe it's 30, but it's not 10K, even on a tiny, tiny suite. So
Yeah, and now that you brought that up, it is interesting because for these kinds of buildings, it's like you have an extended period of time to make ready, market, lease up, and all that, and you're still paying your debt. You have to service your debt every single month. So I feel like a lot of mistakes in underwriting, under budgeting could be revealed quickly when a tenant moves out.
Yeah, your hold costs are your hold costs, property taxes, insurance, and when there's a vacancy, the landlord eats that immediately. And that's definitely a good point. It's easy to underestimate what those true impact is, not just the loss of rent for 1 or 2 months. You'd be like, oh, it's only vacant for 2 months. I'm like, okay, that's fast, but when are you going to start getting rent in?
Yeah. Free rent periods and stuff. Aside from like just the most obvious things, like, listing it with a broker to find a tenant, like what are some ways that maybe you found that's been effective to finding tenants? I've heard Facebook Marketplace for like smaller
For sure.
industrials.
Yeah, and I wish Facebook did a better job because there's no real good category for these types
Mm,
of commercial spaces. People either list it as like a house, and then you get these weird like 2 bedroom, 1 bathroom things for a flex space. But we see it a lot for retail too. If you have like an inline, 2,000 square foot retail space, people are posting it under a house for rent, or then they list it as a product for sale, which is also kind of weird because it's like, how do you pick the category? But if you put it like tools for sale, that's kind of where those guys are browsing, and it will pop up in their feed. But Facebook for sure is great lead source. I think what I do differently or try to differently is really try to understand the tenant's business. And if you understand their business, you might be able to do more targeted outreach and set up your space to be cognizant of what they're doing. And I'll give a quick example. Like if you're doing outside storage and you want a landscaping company, and if you think for whatever reason you're good for like sod nursery type distribution, and you know that they have those piggyback forklifts on the back of their trailers, if you budget in, or if you have additional layouts to where those longer trailers, those flatbeds with that piggyback can fit, that's how you can appeal and really resonate to them, because otherwise they're looking at all these generic iOS yards that only have 75-foot spaces and like, oh well, we need 80, we always need 80. And with ChatGPT and stuff, I can do a new site plan with 80-foot parking spaces in 4 seconds. As I take my existing layout and just make each parking space 80 feet and shrink the aisle or whatever it is. So little things like that, if you can really understand the tenant, I think you'll be better situated to have those conversations and even reaching out proactively.
And how do you know or figure out the tenant demands? I mean, I guess like a nursery could have different demands in each market, right?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like you just talk to them. Sometimes I'm that guy, not quite at Home Depot, but where I get my mulch and stuff is a smaller company, and you can literally just talk to the people as you go about your day. I mean, I know I do it. I talk to plumbers, anybody that comes to my house, like, watch out, I'm gonna chat your ear off. Like, what kind of truck do you got? Oh, where do you park it? Um,
Hmm.
because I'm always curious, and you know, I tend to hire cheaper vendors that aren't like the, national HVAC company or Milestone Electric. So they don't have like the fancy wrap stuff, but they're always like, oh, just park it at home. I'm like, oh, do you have any problems with theft? And he's like, no, that's why I switched from the pickup truck to the van, because the van is more secure and you can't see inside. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, makes sense. But a lot of people, then if they have a trailer, I'm like, where do you park it? And like, I have a self storage unit that I park my trailer in. I'm like, oh, okay. So it's super interesting. That tends to be the type of caliber I hire. But to your point, like, you just ask, just start talking to people. I mean, you don't necessarily have to be buying anything, but I don't see a replacement. There's not like an online forum where you can just chat them up online. You just got to go out and put eyes on the dirt, because real estate is a tangible asset. And even if you don't want to go, just drive around and look at similar location, product, like real estate product that's similar to yours, or product that you want to be like. When you say, I want FedEx as my tenant, well, go drive around. What are the qualities of their existing stuff, and could you make it better? Because
Hmm.
you'll see and observe things that if you start driving around, you'll recognize, like a bunch of tire marks on curbing is probably an inefficient layout. That's, it's not ideal. And the guys don't necessarily want to be clipping the corner all the time, every day. It's, causes damage eventually. But if you see that, then you're like, why are they clipping the corner? It's like, well, because their driveway is too narrow or it's too short, that sort of thing. So if you can observe things like that, you can incorporate it into the future.
It's interesting that you mentioned clipping the corners. So, like, I mean, that I would say it's more like an employee clipping the corners. So, like, how do you think the message gets passed up to management? Like, hey, look, this layout sucks over here. Maybe we should find another space with like a better layout.
I think so. And, the head of operations at the local level, he does know. He is definitely aware of it. And again, I'll give a quick example. So we had waste management as a tenant, and I had the cell phone of the head of operations for the local thing. So he's like a boss, but he is very in tune with the challenges and the issues of his workers who are the drivers because of downtime, because of costs. He's responsible for his own like P&L, or he's responsible for some efficiency metric within the company. And so he was very in tune, and maybe they're a good company, but my point was I had him on a direct communication. We talked about some of these things, but at the end of the day, it's a huge bureaucracy because I also was dealing with the real estate department in Chicago. So I was dealing with a guy up there, and they had a broker. So they had a tenant rep broker as well. So there's a lot of layers. But if you're trying to cut to the core, which I think is your question, it's like, yeah, the person that you can talk to who is a punctual, like responsible, yelling adult, he does know what's going on at that local level because it does if it impacts his bottom line. And look, it's a competitive business, the waste hauling stuff. So I think you can get some good observations with the caveat too that if he's locked into 7 more years of term, they're not going anywhere. They're probably not moving, right?
That's fair. How much? So you mentioned, industrial is mostly front loaded work. I mean, you're doing a lot of diligence, and then obviously when the term comes. But like, how much work do you think it takes, like just overall? And I mean, obviously, like you're running your law firm and this at the same time. So like, how do you manage both of those?
Yeah, I would say that when you're under contract on a deal, I'm probably spending 1 to 2 hours a day, 5 days a week. Part of the problem too is though that's the average, but when you're under due diligence and sometimes stuff comes up, I might spend like 4 hours in one day, and it has to be that day. It could be the morning, it could be the afternoon, it could be like late evening, but it almost like has to be this day. Like an answer has to be made or somebody needs to reach out. And you maybe have a slight window, but 4 hours of real work has to come from somebody. Otherwise, you don't make a decision or you don't make a good decision. And that's risk. But in terms of normal stuff, I would say, I average 2 hours a week, just staying on top of market, touring other sites and just kind of general stuff is 2 hours a week.
And is this like, are you running this investment side solo, or do you have like team members helping you out? Or
Yeah, so that's where my business kind of helps out because I do commandeer my employees. I have some like admin and I have others. I have a lawyer. So if it's like quasi legal, I'll say like, "Hey, can you read the lease and send a letter to the insurance company?" Sometimes they'll roll their eyes and be like, "Oh, well, why am I doing this?" I'm like, "It's legal. You can bill me at your rate." And they're like, "Okay, fine." It's not super enjoyable for them because it's not like a heavy legal task, but it's not like I'm asking them to pick up my dry cleaning and being like, "You work for me, like I'm paying you, go pick up my dry cleaning." Because I understand that. I wouldn't want to do that either. But it's quasi legal. So I do lean on them for a little bit. And maybe I'll say, like, "Hey, can you call this guy and talk to him in Spanish?" And he's a vendor and I'm a little unclear. Then they'll kind of like roll their eyes and be like, okay, well, it's billable. It's not my favorite thing to do, but yes, when I got to the point, for single tenant management, it's still a fairly large volume of work. Nothing is too pressing or hard, but sometimes there would be just a lot of stuff, or if I was busy with the law firm or traveling, I would have to lean on my team. So that's a great segue, though, to partners. I'm a big, big proponent of joint venture, active LLC partners. Just because you can stroke a check for $1 million to buy a property, it doesn't mean you should. And from a risk diversification perspective, but also just sharing the load because in your example again too, it's like, Ron and Leo buy this property together. We both could write the $1 million check and do it alone. but it's a lot easier for me that if I'm on vacation and I'm in Asia and I get some text or email and I'm like, well, I don't know what I'm gonna do. Like, I'll text you and be like, hey Leo, you have money in this project. You have skin in the game. We don't have a ton of issues that we want to pay a property manager 500 or $1,000 a month to do nothing 9 months out of the year. That doesn't make sense. So I'll text you and be like, "Hey, can you help? Can you deal with this?" And you should say like, "Yes, I'm happy to." Because you're a partner. It's your property. I mean, it's 50% of your value. Why wouldn't you? And so I really like partners for that regard, and just in the sense that if you don't have the full team, like my next hire would be kind of that property management type person. I would love for somebody to like drive around all the time. Like I would send them to sites. But if you don't have that as a salaried full time position, who are you going to rely on? And for me, it's like I'd want to rely on my partners, people that I think are smart. They might not be a lawyer, they don't need to be super into commercial real estate, but they can do the follow ups and say, hey, so and so, I got your text from Ron. What's going on? Can you send me a photo? And then they probably want to call you and be like, okay, we were loading something fell off this guy's truck. It's a small fire. The fire department came, and you're like, oh, geez, is anybody hurt? You're like, no, no, it's fine. The building is secure, but just we just wanted to let you know part of your building caught on fire. And you're like, okay, cool. Can you like text me some photos? I'm glad nobody's hurt. Rent's due, in 23 days.
Yeah.
But that sort of thing. I can't do that all the time, but you're just kind of a documentarian, I guess, at that
Mm,
point. You're just getting more information, packaging it up, and you don't even need to make a decision by yourself, but you could of like, oh no, we're not going to file an insurance claim. Just, you fix it or we fix it because it's maybe exterior, but we're not going to file an insurance claim if it's a small fire. And again,
that's
I'm assuming like metal building or concrete exterior facade, not like burned wood. But yeah, so that's how I manage everything.
okay.
And again, with like 8 properties and call it, 12 tenants, it can be a lot, but most of the time it's just ACH, the rent comes in, and ACH, the bank mortgage goes out.
And speaking of joint ventures and partners, I mean, how do you find the partners and how do you sort of agree on like roles and responsibilities with them and like structure these agreements?
Yeah. And I think you just got to be talking to people, tell everybody what you're interested in and what you want to do. I think people, again, are a little bit embarrassed. It's very, again, this is something I saw on Twitter or X. In social media and in online, you have to brag. You have to be very upfront to kind of establish who you are or where you want to be. Plant that flag first because they don't know you from you're just some anonymous letters behind a keyboard. So if you don't brag first, people don't get a good calibration of how they should size you up. What you say after you brag impacts a lot, but brag first and then kind of follow up with content. Versus in person, if you or I were at lunch, I mean, nobody talks like that usually, and they don't say, "Hey, man, I just got a new Porsche, and
Yeah.
yeah, check out my house." It's like we just put all this quartzite in, freaking cost 150 grand for the remodel. It comes across really harsh because in person, I think it's a much longer interaction and you're trying to like find some commonality. This is a long way of saying, I think when you're looking for a partner, you don't necessarily brag, but you need to put yourself out there that like, hey, my name's Leo and I'm really trying to buy a 1,000 square foot industrial building in Charlotte, North Carolina. You're like, okay, that's cool, Leo. Nice to meet you. You're like, yeah, what about you? Like, do you do real estate? Okay, but you've planted that flag, right? You've put yourself as what you want to be and what you want to do. And people, if they're interested, they may ask you, like, oh, well, are you under contract on something? Well, no, not yet. I put out a couple of LOIs. Are you looking at vacant buildings or stabilized? And you could say, stabilized. I just want a coupon clip. And those are the people that you go deeper into. But you gotta, I think, lead with, I say it's braggy because you might feel like, oh, I'm some hot shot. I'm buying a $5 million industrial. I'm trying to buy a $5 million industrial building. It does come across as braggy, but that's how you connect with the people who are interested in that. And if you get a good vibe from their questions, if you think their questions are intelligent questions And if they are polite and reasonable to you and you stay in touch with them, that's how you get partners. Because, yeah, I mean, I would say my partners are all kind of people I know. We have like an email list where I found my partners through friends who also invest, and commercial real estate's really, really small. So once you get into the ecosystem, and if you have a good deal, if you have a track record, your name will get passed around and you can connect with people that way. But if you don't have a deal, if you don't have a track record, it's a little bit harder. And you have to, in your mind, you have to kind of envision where you want to be and tell people that's what I want to do. So for me, I just reach out, I have emails and I will say, hey, it's Ron. I've got a deal under contract. This is the purchase price. This is the address. This is my underwriting. I've got the debt secured at this rate for this term. I'm going to personally guarantee it. I'm raising $1 million. Does anybody want in? So it's just kind of an email list. And people will say, like, oh, I'll put in 200. Okay, I'll put in 300. Somebody else say, I'll put in 100. And then I don't know what that's 6. I'm like, okay, well, I'm good for 4. So that's my equity raise. So we're not doing a 506 offering. We're not doing a full blown LPGP syndication. These are all people that I know who can help and contribute. They'll pick up the baton, so to speak, and they will be active. They'll be reviewing financial statements, or they'll look at the lease with me or something.
Hmm. So most of your deals are all like joint ventures and instead of like syndications.
Yes. Yep. I've never done a 506 or anything. I think could probably raise like 8 million bucks and just all friends and family.
That's cool. Have you ever, I mean, just like with these joint ventures and with putting together a deal, I mean, like I'm always thinking about this. It's like who you work with is very important, right? Like what if you do a deal that just like with someone that you're like, probably won't do it again. Like how do you handle that? And like, do you exit that or do you just like not do another deal with them?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would only say I have like one or two partners that I've taken their money and I didn't really know them that well. They're going okay. They're not like super great, but not super bad either. Nobody's like threatening to sue me. I think what I purposely try to do again, and this is my own safety blanket limitation, is any investor that I take money from, if they're not happy, I just want to be able to write them a check and just say like, hey man, here's your money back. Like, I'm so sorry. Like, I value kind of our friendship more. Sorry it didn't work out the way that you expected or the way that I communicated it, but I just want to be able to write a check back. And kind of leave on good terms. I don't want to lose anybody's money. Um, but if they say, "Oh no, I think my share is worth more," then I'm like, "Okay, well, cool. Then you should stay in the project and stop complaining." But yeah, that's so far been the experience. But I mean, I think good money. There's a lot of money out there, and you can be patient enough to find the good partners.
Hmm, that's true. And I think it's interesting. So going back to an earlier point of how you're sort of like you somehow involve your team on the legal side as well a little bit. Do they take interest in your deals? Are they like Ron, coming in the next deal or anything like that?
Yeah. So funny enough, I did want to open that up to my employees because I felt like it was kind of a perk of being close to me and like seeing this. And I'd always offered it kind of from the beginning, but that was pre realization of some stuff. So they're like, well, the cash flow looks okay, but like, did you really create a ton of value or whatever? And then I exited, and then they see the settlement statements and stuff, and I'm open with it. And then this last deal, we bought a deal in July. Some of the employees put in, and it was a small amount, but for them it's meaningful. So I told them like almost no minimum. Like you got to scrape together something. I know how much I pay you, but you don't have a minimum like Leo. I charge 100, 200 grand minimum. So
That's good.
yeah, so far it's all paying. Again, this is like a stabilized deal. So also I felt comfort too, right? I'm not putting him in like a super speculative ground up tower that needs a zoning height restriction removed. I'm like, no, you don't put your money in that, but it's like a stabilized single tenant deal. Tenant's been in place for a while. That's just coupon clipping. So I'm like, yeah, you can get in this one because it's still a great cash on cash. I think we're at like 10.5% cash on cash.
Hmm,
So for
pretty good.
equity upside, I think it's a good deal.
So what's like the best deal that you've done so far? Just like on high level numbers.
That's kind of interesting. I wonder which project. I guess a COVID deal. put money. This wasn't necessarily like I wasn't running it per se, but I was a limited partner. Put in like 200 grand, and we bought a deal during COVID. We were under contract pre-shutdown, and it just sounds so funny to remember the uncertainty that was in the market. We're like, "What's shutdown? What does this shutdown mean?" But our earnest money was hard, and then the shutdown happened, and people were just freaking out. Like the toilet paper was disappearing. Like some stores had no food, and we had no idea what COVID was at the time and how severe it could be. And everybody's talking zombie apocalypse kind of thing. And we told the seller, we're like, hey man, you can keep our earnest money. Like, we don't even know if our bank's gonna lend. Like, we don't want to lend. Like, just you can have our earnest money. And he's like, no, 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 what can I do? So we got a discount. We got like a COVID discount, which we ended up closing. Cause again, the partners and I talked, we're like, if it's zombie apocalypse, what are we going to do with cash? It's just money on a bank. We're not going to do it. It's like we need bullets and guns and food. And like we already have enough of that anyway. So we're like, yeah, it's just YOLO. Let's buy it with the discount. So we like pushed our price even down. This was an occupied property, great tenant, like, national audited financials. This is one of my first times, like, for a principal reading audited financials. And I'm like, oh, this is so cool. Like 3 billion in revenue audited. So they were a good credit tenant. And, as we all know, after the initial few months of COVID, industrial rents just like shot through the roof, and then the values shot up too. So luckily for that tenant, they were on fixed lease terms. But we knew in our hearts, like, we were in a good spot, because when they're way below market, they're going to pay on time. They're going to be really prompt. They're not going to complain too much. They're just going to ride it out. So we basically held that deal through the end of the lease. We did have to replace a roof, but we just paused distributions for like 3 months and paid for the roof. And then they got in a weird situation too, where they were paying holdover rent. They were trying to buy a new building, like a much bigger building for their location. They didn't renew for us, and so they paid like they entered basically into an amendment. So they did an amendment for like 6 months at holdover rate. So it was like rent 1.5, 150% of the base rent. So it was like, okay, fine, we'll just do that. And then we sold it vacant to a user. So the rough numbers on that were like, we bought it for 3.1, 3.2, I think. Because originally we were around 3.3 and got down to 3.1. And then we sold for 5.6. So plus all the cash flow. And it was like super high cash flow in terms of cap rate when we bought it, because we got that discount. It just helps your cash on cash. But we had 5-year fixed debt. And yeah, I would say that was like a really good deal. Put in like 200 and got all the I don't know, like my check back at closing was like 490, plus all the cash distributions I'd had for the last 4 years. They were pretty significant, other than that pause for the replacement of the roof. So that's what I would say is one of my best deals. And I didn't really run it, but it was my friend. So I was helping out. Like, I would go on site, I would like go take pictures of stuff, but I won't claim under my masthead.
I love it. Well, thanks for sharing that. I got just a couple more questions for you, but before then, how could folks connect with you? What's the type of people that you're trying to meet? Anything like that?
Yeah, my YouTube channel. I also have Ronald Rohde Law, a YouTube channel, just crossed 10,000 subscribers. Well, 10.3, I guess. But it's interesting, because that's something that I'm really proud of, because I feel like the engagement and the quality of our videos has really improved, and it's something that you can't buy. I mean, I I'm really proud of that, and it's taken 5 years, right? I've had that channel for 5 years, and we do a video every week, and it's just so much energy that is given back to me in the comments. So that's one of the things I'm most proud of. I mean, like, I like my kids and my wife and stuff, and but the money on the business deals is fun, but it's very fleeting. It's just chasing a deal, and then once it's over, it's very anticlimactic. You just get a bigger check in your bank account, and you're like, okay, well, so what? It's over. Versus the YouTube still has more to grow, and it is very financially rewarding. But so YouTube is the best way. Follow me, get in touch, have my email and stuff on there. I'm on Twitter, X as well, under the same name, Ronald Rohde Law. But I would say I'm just trying to meet people that are investing in industrial, and want to kind of collaborate. I'm getting more into development, and so maybe some of these how can you start as a small scale industrial developer?
I love it. Yeah, I mean, your YouTube is really great. It's got great information, so I can attest to that as well. I mean, you're not like you're not peddling stuff. You're just like, hey, here's the numbers. Here's what I think. Here's how I think as a attorney slash investor. So it's great stuff. And congrats on the 10K. So
Awesome, appreciate it.
final question is like, if you can go back in time for 10 years and say something to your 10-year younger self, like what's one piece of advice that you would give?
I would have started buying commercial earlier. Maybe I would have started YouTube earlier too. But no, I really think that for so long I was conservative and I don't say scared, but yeah, I was concerned about the downside. But 10 years ago, my downside was way less. I had no kids. I had a small more I mean, I think my mortgage, yeah, 10 years ago, my mortgage was like 2,400 a month with the taxes and escrow. It was like right under 3,000. Every month it was like 3,000. That was my nut. My old self would laugh at what my nut is now. And I'm doing my math like, I need to make like 50 grand this month, Leo, just to cover my expenses. And it doesn't stress me out though. But looking back, that 10-year, I think I could have taken much bigger risks because I didn't realize how much, downside limited I had back then. Worst case, what? I'm gonna have a roommate. I'm gonna, bill a few hours, but I could cover my mortgage. I could eat ramen probably for like 4 grand a month, 5 grand a month, including utilities and stuff. I didn't have a car payment. I never had too much debt. Um, but that's what I would say is take a bigger risk and do what you thought you can do. I mean, don't do it recklessly, which I think if you're conservative, that won't happen, but just take bigger risks. I wish I would have done that earlier.
Hmm, well said. So final question, favorite or most impactful book that you've read?
I mean, I would say the EOS, I kind of quoted it earlier. I
Yes.
think it's
An
Traction,
amazing book.
right?
Yep.
Yeah, I would say that one really resonates with me. I like Howard Marks. What's his market cycle book? Mastering the Market Cycle. That one also is really true. I think there's a lot of truth in that. It helps you be more calm about everything. Cause like in 2008, I was too young and too poor to really buy anything. 2013 was a bit of a dip and my brother and I bought stuff that we could, but we still didn't have a ton of free capital. And we've been riding a rush, for the last 10 years. Now that we're kind of in a lull, I think we're kind of already through the dip. I think we've already hit as much of a dip as we're gonna get.
Hmm, yeah. Well, thanks for sharing everything, Ron. And yeah, thanks for tuning in.
Awesome. Good to talk to you, Leo.
Likewise.